Good morning, everybody. Perhaps good afternoon, depending on what part of the country you're in. Welcome in to a Week 13 edition of Establish the Run's First Look Show. I'm Gary Hartman. Be taking through a quick first glance, just kind of first reaction off the look at the slate for Week 13 here on DraftKings. Really crazy that we are already at Week 13, reaching the end of season-long fantasy leagues here. But DFS does not stop, and neither do we here at Establish the Run. So we'll dive right in with Week 13 here. I think it's an interesting week. It's actually a really interesting week. So 12 games on this slate after a handful of 11-game main slates in a row. So one extra here. Always like to start by talking about the teams that are not on the slate. So only two teams on a bye, Cardinals and the Panthers. Panthers not so consequential for fantasy purposes. Cardinals are with Kyler, usually in play, and obviously DeAndre Hopkins, James Conner, etc. So those guys are off. Thursday night, we have an AFC East matchup of the Bills and the Patriots. So no Bills stuff on this slate, no Ramondre on this slate. Sunday night is Colts Cowboys. So no Jonathan Taylor, none of the Dallas stuff. And then Monday night is Saints Bucks. So that one a little less consequential as well, but no Brady stacks, no Godwin, no Evans, etc. So that said, there is on this slate a bunch of at least three, I think, 50-point game totals. Now it's been a while since we've really barely had even more than one on a slate. It's compared to previous years, and I do a lot of research into historical lineup stuff, where I think over the last 3 or 4 years, we at least average one or two per week as far as 50-point plus game totals. This season's been a little bit different. The game totals have been a lot in the mid-40s, especially on these main slates. So to see three on the main slate with over a 50-point game total, and we'll talk about them, that's definitely noteworthy. And it's definitely going to be ones that we want to attack, I think regardless of ownership, but obviously, listen to the things throughout ETR on the week, and we'll talk about it. Those three games are at 1 o'clock, Jacksonville, Detroit. That's a 51.5 over under. Not surprising. That's in the dome in Detroit. That could be a high scoring affair for sure. And then there's two at the 4 o'clock games, and there's four 4 o'clock Eastern games in general this week. Seattle, Rams, Miami, San Francisco, KC, Cincinnati, and Chargers, Vegas. And it's those two 425s that also are over 50 points. So KC, Cincinnati has the highest on the week at 52.5. We'll talk a lot about that game here today and throughout the week. And then Chargers, Raiders as well is a 50.5 at 425. So lots to pick on this week with three games over 50, but there's some other really interesting spots as well. So we'll dive right in. Let's start with quarterback. What the other I find fascinating quarterback this week is you could really make a case for a lot of these guys up and down the board, both expensive, mid-tier, and cheap. And we'll talk it through. But kind of figuring out which of those guys you really want to pick on throughout the week will be critical to your success next week, or this coming week. So let's talk about it. Mahomes is Patrick Mahomes. He's an absolute monster. In my opinion, completely matchup proof here. Again, we talked about him being in the top projected scoring game of the week. This was his first game below 30 points in 5 weeks almost. So he had 22.4 DraftKings points. Still did throw the ball 42 times, 320 yards. Only had the one passing touchdown, though. Felt like it could have been a much bigger day. I think the Rams ended up slowing this game down a little bit. The Chiefs didn't have to do too much to win and always put up 26 points. Now, against the Bengals, I think this game could go back and forth a lot more. I definitely like Mahomes, and obviously it's expensive to get to, and we'll talk about some of his stack options, particularly Travis Kelce is also expensive to get to. But I think because of all these legitimate plays on this slate, I'm wondering if his ownership will be down a little bit. I like Mahomes a lot. Hurts, also really like a lot. I think Tennessee definitely, lulls the other team into passing more. I think they have a pretty good run defense. So I do wonder if maybe his rushing floor comes down just a bit this week, but I'm not too concerned about that because I think you see the DraftKings metric as far as Tennessee against opposing quarterbacks, 27. So I think they do give up a lot of work through the air here. We haven't seen Jalen Hurts actually crack 200 passing yards in 3 weeks, but we know what he could do. He does find the end zone through the air. He is an MVP candidate. He obviously has that rushing floor, and the 8,000 price tag, I also think might keep people off of him a little bit. So I do think he's interesting for sure. So those are your two really high spend up options. Then you get Lamar at home against Denver. Had his best game in a while with 24 points, but we still haven't really seen the ceiling since week 3 with those 2 40-point back-to-backs. Like, he's the kind of guy that makes my pool every week, but Denver's defense is still good despite how terrible their offense is. And on a week like this where there are so many quarterback options throughout the every high, mid, and low tier, I'm less likely to go to Lamar on a week like this. Now, I'm not ruling him out of my player pool because he's Lamar and we know what the ceiling is, but I'm less likely to pick on him on a week like this. Justin Fields will have to wait and see. Obviously, did miss last week with the shoulder dislocation. If he plays, I think he'd be an interesting contrarian tournament play. But we're a ways away from knowing if that's going to happen. He's at home against the Packers. Herbert, for sure, interested there. Had his best game, actually his highest scoring DraftKings game of the season in week 12 here against the Cardinals. Threw about 47 times, did have 3 passing touchdowns. I think hopefully the Chargers have turned a corner here as far as just kind of the offense they can run. I'm incredibly frustrated watching this team under Brandon Staley. I think they're all consistently underachieving. Obviously, they didn't have Keenan Allen for much of this season, but I still very much believe in the Justin Herbert talent. And I know that for sure he's able to put up these huge games. We haven't seen these 30-plus point games, but they're coming, and this could easily be one of them in Vegas. This is going to be a fun game to watch, and I'm very interested in Herbert. You also get a $1,100 discount on Mahomes with a similar, maybe not as high as the ceiling this year, but a similar ceiling. Burrow on the other side of that Chiefs game, you're definitely going to be in play for sure. Might be getting does look like he's getting Jamar Chase back this week. We'll see about Joe Mixon, who's dealing with a concussion, but hopefully the Bengals will be close to full strength, which, we already talked about the 52.5 over under. So really exciting stuff here for Burrow. Definitely going to be in play at 6,900. So as you see, even of these first 6 guys, you can really make an argument for 4 or 5 of them. 2 I'm less interested in this week. Going into San Francisco, tough spot, coming up only a 15-point game against the Texans. You have all these other guys on the slate. Really less interested in 2 and doubles going this week. Deshaun Watson makes his debut. And of course, it is against the Houston Texans. I think you could throw him in a GPP pool. Now, he's been practicing for a while. There's no reason to think he isn't fully healthy. 700 days since his last appearance, that blurb says. That's pretty crazy. But, he's got to start. We know what the ceiling is. I think I don't think people are going to really click on him. I think you could go there in tournaments. So it's something to consider. Less interested in Geno this week, both for a couple of reasons. One, the Rams, I don't believe in their ability to push at all right now. They're one of the worst teams in the league. This is in LA. They still do have a good front 7. A ton of options on this slate. They're on the road. Just less interested in Geno this week. Trevor Lawrence, though, I am definitely interested. I'm interested in the other quarterback on the other side of this too. So here's where we start getting into these sub 6K options. Trevor Lawrence is the optimal quarterback this past week. So, he's definitely playing well. Had his best game of his career beating the Ravens, I think. 321 yards, 3 touchdowns, no picks, almost 130 quarterback rating, nearly 29 DraftKings points, only 5,900. Now he gets the Lions in this potential shootout on Ford Field. I don't play Trevor Lawrence very often, but this is definitely one of the weeks that I would be looking to. And we'll talk about the guy on the other side of that game in Jared Goff, who's only 5,300. Now, we haven't really seen the ceiling too much out of him. Did have a 37-point game against Seattle. We've seen it, though, in Goff in these kind of up-pace games. We've seen him be viable in the past. I don't see why it's not possible again. So I think Jared Goff at 5,300 and Trevor Lawrence at 5,900 are interested in that game. You got Mike White at 5,400 against the Vikings. Vikings have been giving up a ton of big play through the air. He was almost the optimal quarterback this past week. He was once in week 8, I think last year, he was the perfect quarterback as well. So this is a guy we have to take it seriously for fantasy purposes. We know that the Jets have the receiving corps to support him. This game in Minnesota should be a positive game script as far as a throwing script for the Jets. So I think Mike White also at 5,400 is in play. So you got all these guys. Jimmy Garoppolo, you can make an argument for against the Dolphins as well. Dolphins have been a pass funnel for a lot of this season. So you got a ton of guys here. Daniel Jones, you've been looking at in tournaments a lot. Now, that's a little bit of a tougher spot against Washington with kind of the state of the Giants. But still, my point is there's a lot of options at quarterback this week. So think carefully, kind of play with construction, see if you want to spend down, spend up. We'll talk about it throughout the week. I think I'll try to break it down more in my leverage column coming out Friday night or Saturday morning as far as kind of breaking down how to decide between a week like this where quarterback pool is so deep, but it's critical as it is every week. And I always stress it. Getting the right stack, getting the right quarterback seems obvious, but people are always willing to just try to throw crap against the walls in tournaments. And I don't think that's the right strategy. I think, you really have to seek out ceiling. And there's a lot of ceiling options this week. So let's move over to running back. Christian McCaffrey is the most expensive, coming through the questionable tag here, has some knee irritation. I think if he goes, he's all right. we've only seen the one real smash game from him this year with that 40-pointer in week 8. The matchup isn't so fantastic. Miami, I'd much prefer to pass the ball against them, but he could be involved with that. I think if you want to attack this game, he's a piece of it, but I don't mind kind of looking at the other spend up options this week over CMC, including Austin Eckler, who, the guy's more pass catching machine than man at this point, right? Like 15 more targets in week 12. He's going to break that record, I think, for running back receptions. We already talked about wanting to attack this game. I don't mind stacking him with Herbert. I don't mind stacking most running backs with their quarterbacks if they have any pass catching floor. Obviously, Eckler is the epitome of that. So he's a great play. It's a fantastic matchup, both on the ground, through the air, in correlation, as a solo play, all of it. Less interested in Saquon this week. I think teams are just knowing what to do against the Giants. And Saquon at this point, stack the box, make them throw against you. The Washington has a very good front seven. They get beat through the air. So now he could be involved through the air. Maybe, he catches 8-9 balls and catches the third ball through the end zone. And he's the kind of guy that is matchup proof in my opinion, meaning I want exposure to him every week in some capacity, but I'm not worrying about getting too much Saquon Barkley this week. I'd rather Eckler. I'd rather Derrick Henry, who's underneath him, who gets the Philadelphia Eagles. The Eagles' one weakness on defense has been their run defense for sure. Now they did sign Linval Joseph and Ndamukong Suh, who will get more involved in that interior defensive line as the season goes on here. But Derrick Henry's Derrick Henry. We're starting to get into December Derrick Henry, and we love December Derrick Henry. We like cold weather Derrick Henry. That's where we like to pick on Derrick Henry. And this is in Philadelphia. It should be cold there this weekend. I know in New York City today it's the low 40s. We're going to get that December weather Derrick Henry, who just dominates in that cold weather. And this matchup actually isn't terrible. And even in correlation, you want him on the other side of Eagles stuff. I think that's good. So I like him as my second favorite of this top 5 group. But my favorite, at least from a matchup perspective, is one Nick Chubb. And I see someone in there asking for FanDuel plays. It's just too hard to do a quick first look and cover both sites. So we stick to DraftKings here. But obviously, Nick Chubb is someone that we do enjoy for FanDuel, right? Obviously, he doesn't have too much of a pass catching floor, but he does have a really high touchdown upside. That's something we look for in FanDuel. That said, I'm going to rely on production this week against the nut matchup against Houston. He was the cover boy of this video once again this week. I think I'm just going to keep attacking the running back one against Houston as the cover here. I think, he's still 8,000, so he's priced up with these guys. Wouldn't be surprised if he does come through with less ownership than most of the guys, even in this great matchup. I think 200 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns is the ceiling this week. Yeah, that good. They're going to want to run through him. We'll see. They do get Deshaun Watson back, so maybe they are going to try to get him into a rhythm and throw a little bit. But I definitely think like 150 yards and a touchdown on the ground is well within the range of outcomes. So Chubb, who's already over 1,000 yards on the season, 12 rushing touchdowns. The guy is like the model of consistency and gets a fantastic matchup here. Hard to avoid, as does, my goodness, Josh Jacobs. It was one of my worst GPP weeks of the season, and that's only because I barely had any Josh Jacobs exposure, which was really just a mistake on my part. Had him in my pool, didn't get in nearly enough, and wasn't careful about making sure I had that exposure. And obviously, if you didn't have Josh Jacobs in week 12, you were going to be sunk. And that's what happened to me, and I'm sure many other people, because he was only like 3% owned. 51 DraftKings points, 229 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns, 74 yards through the air, 6 catches. He was the catalyst, the focal point, the center, everything of their offense. And now he's in this game that maybe is the second most attractive game of the week after KC Cincinnati, or maybe you could say it's a 1A, 1B, 1C with Detroit, Jacksonville, whatever. But you get this Chargers team that has been bad against the run for a good amount of, 2-3 years now. At home, we know Derek Carr is check down city. He loves keeping drives alive by checking down. You could see it with Josh Jacobs' pass game work this year. Another 7 targets this past week, 6 catches. He's been the biggest surprise of fantasy sports this year, and at least fantasy football, and he's been absolutely excellent. Now, I think he gets steamed up a little bit coming off this week in the good matchup, but hard to avoid. I'm less interested in Dalvin Cook against the Jets. I'd rather go to some of these other guys. Tougher matchup. I think that game operates through the air a little bit more. Mixon, if he plays, will definitely be in play as we're going to attack this game as a whole. You could stack him with Burrow. You could bring him back in Mahomes stuff, but dealing with the concussion still. So it might be P. Ryan once again. We'll keep an eye there. Kenneth Walker gets the Rams. Rams still have a very good run defense. I'm just, I get the Rams stink, and at this point they're probably playing for I don't know. They don't even have their own draft pick, but I think they're throwing in the towel this season if they haven't already. But I'm not taking him out of my player pool, but he's not someone I'm picking on for cash games or someone that I'm going to be interested in playing too much of. Aaron Jones, on the other hand, does get the Bears. Really good spot here for him. His pass game role has been really good. Not as efficient on the ground the past couple of weeks, but I think that could come back easily against Chicago here. He did have 35 points in the same matchup in week 2. I think Aaron Jones is a really good sub 7K play. Not going to comment on ETN. We'll see. He's got a sprained foot. I'm guessing he wouldn't play. We'll see what they end up doing on running back. Jermichael Hasty. I know they did just pick up Darrell Henderson. Miles Sanders. I prefer that Eagles passing game this week. Coming off a huge game. Would be surprised to see him do it again in a worse matchup. I think he's fine. You could play him in tournaments, but I'm not so interested. Montgomery against the Packers. I think we're still without Khalil Herbert for another week or two. He's on IR. So at 6,200, I think Montgomery would be in play. I prefer him actually if Fields is back, because I think, that it opens up running lanes for David Montgomery, similar to the way the run game always works in Baltimore, where the running back there seems to always be effective because of the threat of Lamar. I think Fields being back would open things up for Montgomery in a decent matchup here. So I like Montgomery if Fields plays. Let's wait on the Pittsburgh of it all. Najee Harris left the game last night. Assuming we're not going to have Jaylen Warren back. So if he plays against Atlanta, it's actually a pretty good spot, but I think we just have to wait and see there. Jeff Wilson Jr. definitely busted as chalk last week with only 12 points, left the game early. I'm not going to comment much on that Miami backfield. It's not a great matchup against San Francisco. Would prefer the pass catchers there. Jamal Williams gets the Jaguars. I'm going to be attacking this game, both him and Swift. Swift, who played a little bit more on that Thanksgiving slate, did have 8 targets through the air. So hopefully we'll see him be more integrated into that offense. But both guys are in play. Pierce gets the Browns, and I think no one's going to want to click on Dameon Pierce because of how bad he's been now for like 3 or 4, maybe 5 straight weeks. But the role is still good. Burkhead got hurt. This is a matchup against Cleveland has been a soft run defense all season. I think Dameon Pierce will fall through the cracks in tournaments into somebody you can go to. You got the Chiefs running backs. Pacheco has been clearly the guy. He carried the ball 22 times last week. Wasn't efficient because it was against the Rams run D, but did find the end zone. Gets a better matchup here with Cincinnati. And that's really it. I mean, you go down here, see what happens with the Jets. There might be some value there. Might be some value with Latavius Murray again, the Washington guys. There is some value here as you go down the Rams guys, although that offense is just so hard to pick on in general right now. So let's, kind of tend to wait and see approach with San Francisco as well. There might be some real value opening up on the ground. So keep an eye on injury report for the value plays at running back. Wide receiver, Jefferson gets the Jets. That's a tougher matchup. I mean, he is absolutely matchup proof at this point. We've seen him put up 30 points in Buffalo, 32 points against New England, who's been pretty good against the pass this year. So it's not the ideal spot, but it doesn't really matter because Justin Jefferson, I want plenty of exposure. Tyreek Hill and Waddle, I want it for sure. I think San Francisco is a good defense, and this is in San Fran. I can see the Miami offense struggling. This is Mike McDaniel's return to San Francisco. I think they'll know a little bit about what he's going to do. I would lean San Francisco in this game if I were to pick a winner, pick somebody to cover the spread. I don't even know what the spread is. But, again, Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, you don't roll these guys out of tournament pools. Devontae Adams gets the Chargers. I want him in correlation. I don't know if I like him as much as a one-off play this week, but we know just the role is so elite. First non-30-point game in week 12 in 4 weeks. I wouldn't be surprised to see him bounce back. He is fantastic. Was able to kind of make Pat Surtain struggle a lot in week 11. I'm not too worried about the Chargers pass defense there. Jamar Chase back. I don't mind being a week early there. Certainly can be in play for sure. Absolutely. Chiefs have been bad against the pass all year. We're going to attack this game. Him and Higgins both. Even Higgins priced up at 7,200. Both of them will be in play here. AJ Brown definitely against Tennessee. Revenge game at home. Love AJ Brown. Actually, love AJ Brown this week in this hurt stuff. I think AJ Brown goes nuts for sure in the colder weather. I really like AJ Brown. Waddle, we already spoke about the Dolphins stuff. Amon-Ra, 7,100. They brought him up a little bit from Thanksgiving, coming off almost a 31-point DraftKings performance. But again, I'm attacking this game. I have no problem going to Amon-Ra in cash. I think Amon-Ra is not too expensive till he's like mid-7s, high 7s. So I think he's good. Seattle guys, we prefer to attack the Rams through the air. So I think those guys are in play for tournaments. Debo, less interested there. I mean, you use them in tournaments because the ceiling can get you there. But if Christian McCaffrey doesn't play, I guess is a little bit more interesting because of the rushing upside, but he hasn't been there. He did get banged up in that game. Not so interested. Keenan Allen, now fully healthy, it seems, had another 7 targets this last week, did find the end zone. I'm expecting a huge game out of Keenan Allen coming up soon. Could be as soon as this week. Christian Kirk, that's a great matchup against the Lions. Interested in Devonta Smith too, but do like AJ Brown better even at cost for the Eagles there. I think Ayuk will be in play against Miami. Miami's given up big plays through the air all year. We'll talk about Kittle in a second as well. Already spoken about the Seahawks guys. McLaurin against the Giants is probably going to be in play, assuming Adoree Jackson is still out. But that game is just going to be ugly in general. Mike Williams questionable for the Chargers. That obviously impacts some things. Sutton is all the way down to 5,500 here against the Ravens. We saw the Jaguars be able to move the ball through the air here. I know Denver is just so bad, but the target share is there. He's only 5,500. Like, I think he's somebody that you can keep going to in tournaments here, despite the inefficiencies of that offense. I don't know why they're not pricing up Garrett Wilson more. It's just crazy. This is a great matchup against the Vikings as a team that's given up a ton through the air. Clearly, I think he's Mike White's favorite target already. He had 2 touchdowns. Could have had a bigger game. Was five yards away from the bonus. I mean, come on, Garrett Wilson. You can throw Elijah Moore in your pool this week. I think you can get really weird with the Jets because I think they're back now as far as from like a pass offense standpoint. Going down there, I think Pickens and Deontay would be in play in a good matchup against the Falcons. Although, you're always worried about the Falcons just being such a run-heavy team as far as what you can support there. And then, I think that's really it. Under 5K, go check out the cheap wide receiver volume column. That'll be up on Thursday afternoon on establishthorun.com. Subscribe if you haven't already. We'll be crushing the rest of the season. Tight ends here. Travis Kelce, I already mentioned the Kelce Mahomes sack will be expensive to do, but hopefully it keeps ownership down on that combination a little bit. I have no problem going there. This was a down week for Kelce with 4 for 57 and a touchdown, still at 8 targets. The guy's been a monster. Mark Andrews gets the Broncos, just an okay matchup. He's due for a bigger game, but I'm not in love with the spot. Hockenson against the Jets, same thing. I mean, I like him as a bring back, I think, in Jets stuff if you're going there. I think the Jets are a little bit more vulnerable against tight ends in the middle of the field than they are with kind of their shutdown corners, but definitely like George Kittle the most out of all these tight ends. Above 5K this week. It's a Miami team who's been really bad against tight ends, especially this year. We mentioned that they've been able to kill them through the pass in general. He seems to become like a little bit of an every other week guy, which means he's due this week. I definitely like Kittle to find the end zone. Then you kind of take you start to take your shots. You like Everett in correlation stuff. I think Freiermuth is in play against Atlanta. Njoku in correlation as well. And then you go down to, Foster Moreau, who had another 7 target. Like the role is really good there. Did find the end zone. So at 3,600, I think he would be in play. And then you'll have some punts this week in the 3K to, range. Daniel Bellinger might be back for the Giants. Evan Ingram gets the Lions. He's only 3K. Noah Fant is only 3K. Logan Thomas is only 2,900 in a good match with the Giants. So there's some interesting punts. Tight end's actually not terrible this week. That'll just about do it. Someone asked in chat if Jordan Love plays. I have any interest in a Love Watson stack. I think that's interesting against the Bears for sure. Obviously only 5,100. The problem, as I mentioned already, is that quarterback this week is super, super deep. You could get up to Mike White for only 300 more. I think I'd rather Mike White, but I think Love with Watson, Love with Lazard, would probably be in play if Aaron Rodgers doesn't play. I think we kind of know it. We don't know if Jordan Love has a ceiling is my issue here. And it's in Chicago. I just don't love it. But I think it's something you consider in tournaments. Defense, I don't have much to say on defense ever on this show, but avoid the chalk. All right, that will just about do it for the week 13. My goodness, first look show. A fun week. I really think this is going to be maybe more challenging because of the high spreads and people jamming certain games and, a little bit of a bigger slate than we've had of the last couple of weeks, but definitely a lot to dive into, a lot of high end plays throughout the slate, a lot of decision points as you kind of go throughout your week here. So I'll leave you with that. I wish you the best of luck. Of course, check out everything else we have going on here at Establish the Run. Adam Levitan's solo pod will be out today, and then Adam and Evan's team by team pods later tonight as well. Lots of information will be getting you going. Go subscribe on establishthorun.com. And I wish you all the absolute best of luck in week 13.